guys, and welcome into this edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. It is Anthony here with you, and it is the day of Duke and Carolina matchup number 3. Although some Duke fans want to call it matchup number 1, the Tar Heels did win the 2 regular season games over the Blue Devils, 82-72 in game 1 in Cameron, and then of course 79-70 in Chapel Hill to close out the regular season. Now the Tar Heels and Blue Devils will clash in Charlotte. It should be a fantastic matchup following last night's big win for the Tar Heels, an 83-70 win over Louisville. I'll take you through it just a little bit here. We'll talk just a little bit about the Louisville game, and then we'll circle back around and help you preview Duke. Also, we'll be back tomorrow if the Tar Heels make the final. Expecting that Josh will be along with me on that one. But for today, it is just me to try to help to get you prepared for this matchup against the Duke Blue Devils. So, starting with last night's game, the 83-70 win over the Louisville Cardinals. It wasn't the cleanest game from the Tar Heels. Definitely not the best performance that we've seen from them all season. Louisville had some success inside. Stephen Enoch was very successful once again, and you look at this game, but the one thing that the Tar Heels did that was different than the first time that they matched up with both Sutton and Enoch having great games, Jordan Nwora did not have a great game. Scored just 7 points in the game last night. You have to hand Kenny Williams a ton of credit for that, as the senior stepped up and had a fantastic performance on the defensive end. Despite getting knocked out of the game at one point with a shoulder injury, he re-entered and was able to finish the game out. Meanwhile, for the Tar Heels, on the offensive end, Kobe White with another fantastic performance to lead the way for the Tar Heels, 19-7-6 in the game. So he was everywhere for Carolina and was doing a fantastic job speeding up the pace, which is where Carolina had the most success when they were able to get out on the fast break. We saw it early in the first half, and then again towards the middle part of that second half, where Carolina was able to speed up the pace and pretty much run Louisville out of the gym. Cam Johnson with another great performance, most of that coming early on. Of course, he was part of that transition offense. Everybody remembers the basket where Louisville cut the lead to 13-10, and then Cam comes down and knocks down a 3 to make it 16-10. Cam Johnson just doing what he does whenever he gets the basketball this season, and that's finishing, whether it's in the mid-range, whether it's from three-point range, even inside. He had a couple of baskets as well. Luke May was the guy that did most of the damage down low, though. 19 points for Luke May, a quiet performance from him, and he really seemed to challenge himself last night. One of the tough shooting nights for him that we've seen. Luke May never makes it easy, and when I say tough shooting night, I mean the shots that he was taking were tough. He was able to make the ones that he needed to, though. There were a few misses, but Luke May never makes it easy on himself. He's just a hard worker, though, that finds a way to put in some of those tough fadeaway jump shots, and he did that once again last night. Have to hand it to Brandon Robinson coming off the bench. Knocked down 2 big-time threes and played 14 minutes. Also was very active defensively. B-Rob has picked up his game as we've gone throughout the season. We've talked about that plenty here on the podcast, and we expect he will play a big role once again tonight for Carolina, as will Seventh Woods, who really didn't see a ton of time in the game against Louisville, but in the time that he did see, he really did step up and play well. Meanwhile, a guy that we hadn't heard from in a while, Sterling Manley, because of the knee injury, he was forced to play a key role last night with foul trouble against Garrison Brooks, Nazir Little, and Luke May. At one point, both guys had 3 fouls midway through the second half. Sterling Manley came in, and granted it was only for about a minute, maybe a minute 30 at the max, but he did end up with a great defensive play to nearly take the ball away, and then did a fantastic job to finish on the other end. So gotta hand it to Sterling Manley for stepping up when the Tar Heels needed him, and you wonder if he could be a factor tonight with the Tar Heels facing facing Zion Williamson and the Duke Blue Devils. We'll talk about that more here in a minute, though, as we wrap up the Louisville recap. And as for the overall performance for Carolina, the takeaways that you should take from it, Carolina, another fantastic game defensively. Louisville did not shoot the ball well at all in the game. Kenny Williams with a fantastic game defensively, as we mentioned earlier. Also, Garrison Brooks had some success, although he did get himself into a little bit of foul trouble. But for the most part, did handle the inside rather well. Louisville did have a few moments at the basket. Stephen Enoch off the bench caused a little bit of problems. But other than that, Carolina took care of the business that they had to. And now they circle around to play in the semifinal game that will take place tonight at 9 p.m. at the Spectrum Center in Charlotte. And they will be facing the Duke Blue Devils. That's right. They took down the Syracuse Orange last night, 84-72, behind Zion Williamson's 29-14. He had 21 and 9 of those in the first half. It was really just a dominant performance from him. Syracuse had trouble containing him inside. And, of course, they had some guys that got into foul trouble as well. The problem for Duke, nobody else really had that great of a game. It was really all in the hands of Zion Williamson and R.J. Barrett, although R.J. Barrett, another one of those tough nights shooting from the field. Meanwhile, Trey Jones, he had a tough night. Did not shoot the ball all that well, and Cam Reddish with a similar performance as well. So for Carolina, the key going into this game, look, Zion is going to have his points. I think everybody knows that. The key will be make sure that no one else goes nuts. R.J. Barrett, I think, will have a chance to have a pretty solid game, although he has to shoot better for Duke to be able to pull this out. And Kenny Williams will be there defending him. So if you are a Carolina fan, I'm telling you, there's a reason to trust Kenny Williams. He is a senior. He has been fantastic throughout this run for Carolina through the end of the season and now into the conference tournament. And I would expect him to have another good performance on Friday night against the Duke Blue Devils. Meanwhile, inside Carolina, how do they match up with Zion, you may ask? Well, you got Luke May, who will make those tough shots like we saw last night against Zion. One of the things that I think Carolina has to do, and we've seen a couple of teams do it this year, although not many, is get Zion into foul trouble. While he may be a force on the offensive end, he does have his moments on the defensive end, but he is extremely aggressive, and if you're Carolina, that's got to be one of the areas that you at least try to attack. And the other way that they can attack Zion, speed the game up. Although Zion is athletic, running at the fast pace at that size is not easy if you have to do it for a huge amount of time. So expect Carolina to try to speed it up as they always do. As we talked about, it was the most successful aspect of their game last night. Expect Kobe White to try to speed it up once again. You wonder if Zion will be affected because it is his first time playing in the rivalry. And it could have a little bit of an effect. You wonder, though, if maybe a little bit of the rivalry, factor is taken out of it by the fact that it is a conference tournament. It's a little bit of a different environment, although it should still be a lively environment with a split crowd, mostly inside the Spectrum Center. Carolina with a good showing yesterday. Duke also, though, showed out well their fan base did. So it should be a fantastic matchup for Carolina. In the end, who's the guy to watch for on Carolina? Well, I think some would say, of course, it's Cam Johnson. I agree with that. I think Luke May will also be a guy to watch for. I think one of the guys that you've got to keep an eye on to have a sizable game in this one will be Kenny Williams. It feels like this is one of those games where Kenny Williams will step up. He has the task of shutting down R.J. Barrett, and he did a fantastic job when the Heels matched up against R.J. Barrett back on March 9th, just about 6 days ago. Now he faces him 6 days later. Don't think Kenny Williams has forgotten how to guard him. And I think Kenny Williams also knows this is another huge game for the Tar Heels. He always seems to step up in these types of moments. And I think Kenny Williams steps up big. I think Carolina does win. It's going to be a very, very close game, though. With Zion back in the lineup, it's not going to be easy, considering the man shot 13 for 13 yesterday. there is reason to believe that this will be a classic game between these two teams. Carolina with the balance, Duke with the superstar. I have Carolina winning, though. Give it to me by 3 to 5 points. I think Carolina pulls it out in a nail-biter, and they will advance on to the final where they will face the winner of Virginia and Florida State. That gets underway at 7 o'clock. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. Josh will be back with us for the final preview is what we expect, but if not, it will be me once again, and then we will circle back around and definitely have Josh back when we get ready to preview the tournament. If you like what you hear here from the Roy's Boys podcast, go back and listen to some of the older episodes. There's some good ones in there where we talked to a couple of guys. R.L. Bynum, we talked to him of the Triangle Sports Network. We talked to him about the ACC tournament as well as what Carolina had to do to earn that 1 seed. Go back and listen to that. That's still definitely relevant because Carolina, with the win over Louisville, I don't really think did much to help their stock because that was pretty much expected. Tonight might be what locks up the 1 seed for Carolina. Also, you can go back and listen to an interview that we had with Travis T-Bone Hancock of WFNZ in Charlotte, where he talked about the Duke team that he pulls for, but also did a great job of giving us some unbiased opinions on what he thinks of the ACC tournament. Again, tons of relevant stuff, especially considering that he talked a ton about the Carolina-Duke matchup that was expected and that will now take place. If you guys like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, and you can leave us a comment as well or a review. We really appreciate that. You can do that on Spreaker. That's where it has mainly been hosted. But also, you can go to iTunes, Google Podcasts carries it, as well as iHeartRadio and Spotify, if those are the areas that you love to listen to your podcast. As always, you can check out my podcast. That's the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. We're in the off season, so it's not quite as active as the regular season for Tar Heel football, but we've got a fantastic interview with Lee Pace that's up there. Next week, we are going to sit down and talk to Sam Doughton and ask him, or Sam Doughton of the Argyle Report, that is, and ask him what he thinks of some of the key battles for the Tar Heels as they sit at the moment and where he thinks they could possibly go as we go throughout the spring. And then, of course, we have some great articles online. That is www.heeltoughblog.com. You can check out all of the spring action, as well as a great article that was written just a couple of days ago on Patrice Rene and his growth to become a leader for the Tar Heel defense. Also, if you like reading blogs, well, guess what? This podcast has a blog. It's the Roy's Boys blog. That's written by Josh Marlowe himself, and he should have everything that you need. He'll have a recap of tonight's game against the Duke Blue Devils after that game is over, so keep an eye out for that. And, of course, you guys can see that on Medium.com. You can also subscribe to that blog there and keep up with everything that the Tar Heel basketball team has going on as they head towards the NCAA tournament. You wonder if the Tar Heels will be able to wrap up the 1 seed. When they find out, you will find out right here. The Roy's Boys podcast will have you covered. So, want to thank you guys for listening to this edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. For Josh, who was unable to be with us today, I'm Anthony. We will see you next time. Go Tar Heels.